You know the headline. May 2nd, 2011, a walled compound in Pakistan. The most wanted man on earth, dead before sunrise. And you know the name the world gave the men who did it, SEAL Team 6. But here is what almost no one can tell you. There is no SEAL Team 6. Not officially. Not anymore. The name is a deception that was built on purpose. The structure underneath it has never been laid out plainly on camera, and the colors that divide it, red, blue, gold, silver, are not trivia, they are the whole story. What you are about to hear is how the unit actually works, taken apart one layer at a time. To understand the unit, you first have to understand the failure that forced it into existence. On April 24, 1980, 8 American servicemen died in the Iranian desert without ever reaching the enemy. The operation was called Eagle Claw, a mission to rescue 53 American hostages held inside the United States Embassy in Tehran. It never reached the city. At a remote refueling point, codenamed Desert 1, a helicopter collided with a transport aircraft on the ground. Both burned. The mission was aborted. The hostages stayed in captivity for another 9 months. It was not a failure of courage. It was a failure of structure. The men had come from 4 different service branches that had never trained together, under no single commander, with no standing unit built for this exact kind of work. The official review board, the Holloway Commission, said it without flinching. The United States needed a permanent counter-terrorist force, rehearsed, ready to move in hours, not weeks. The Army was already quietly building one called Delta Force, but Delta could not come from the sea, and more than 70% of the planet is water. How do you build a unit to do the impossible? You start by admitting the last attempt failed, and then you give one man almost no rules. The Navy needed its own answer to Desert 1, and it needed it fast. The man they handed it to was a Vietnam veteran named Richard Marcinko, a lieutenant commander with a reputation for ignoring procedure and producing results anyway. In 1980, the Navy gave him a blank sheet and an almost unlimited budget to build a maritime counterterrorism unit from nothing. He had roughly 6 months. He handpicked the first operators himself, pulling the most aggressive men he could find out of the existing teams, in interviews that had less to do with a resume and more to do with whether a man would keep fighting when everything went wrong. Then Marcinko did something deliberate. At the time, the Navy had exactly 2 sea, air, and land teams in existence, SEAL Team 1 on the west coast, SEAL Team 2 on the east. Marcinko named his new unit SEAL Team 6. There was no Team 3, no 4, no 5. He invented the number to fool Soviet intelligence, to make Moscow believe the United States already had at least 6 of these teams, when in truth it had 1. The name itself was a piece of disinformation, and it worked so well that the public still uses it today, decades after the unit officially stopped being called that at all. Because in 1987, after Marcinko rotated out, the Navy quietly dissolved SEAL Team 6 on paper and rebuilt it under a new, deliberately forgettable name, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU. The word development was chosen precisely because it explains nothing. Marcinko's own story ended badly. He was convicted in 1990 on charges tied to a government contract connected to his special operations work, and he served time in a federal prison. The man who built the most famous unit on Earth was written out of its official lineage almost the moment he left it. That erasure was not an accident. It was the template for everything that came after. So how is it actually built? Start at the top and work down. The Naval Special Warfare Development Group sits inside the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, the secret headquarters created that same year, 1980, to control America's most sensitive units. Its home is a fenced annex at Dam Neck, on the Virginia coast near Virginia Beach. From the road, it looks like nothing. Behind the fence is the most selective direct action unit in the United States military. Below the command, the unit is divided into squadrons, and each squadron is known by a color. This is the part nobody explains. The original assault squadrons, the shooters, the men who actually hit the target, are gold, blue, and red. A fourth assault squadron, silver, was stood up in the late 2000s when the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan stretched the unit past its limit. Each assault squadron breaks down into smaller troops, and each troop into assault teams of only a handful of operators. When you pictured the men who went over the wall in Abbottabad, you were picturing Red Squadron, one color, one slice of the whole. But assault is only half of what these squadrons are. Each color also carries its own reconnaissance and sniper element. The men who arrive first, who watch, and who deliver a precise shot when one shot is all there will be. The discipline of that role became visible to the entire world on April 12, 2009. 3 DEVGRU snipers, firing from the rolling fantail of a Navy destroyer in open ocean swells, killed 3 Somali pirates holding Captain Richard Phillips in an enclosed lifeboat. 3 near-simultaneous shots, 3 hits in failing light. The public called it a miracle. Inside the fence, it was simply the job. Think about what that level of precision actually requires, and who is allowed to attempt it. Then come the squadrons that never make the films. Gray Squadron runs the boats and the maritime mobility. The part of the unit that still remembers it belongs to the Navy. And then there is Black Squadron, where the assault squadrons break down a door. Black Squadron works in the shadow before that door even exists. It is the unit's own intelligence and surveillance element. Operators in civilian clothes who deploy ahead of a mission to gather information, watch a target, and prepare the ground in places where a uniform would be a death sentence. They do not look like soldiers. That is the entire point. Why divide a single unit into colors that do not share everything with one another? Hold that question. The answer is the most important part of this story. To wear any of those colors, a man must first survive Green Team, the unit's selection and training course. Candidates do not walk in off the street. They are already SEALs, most with years in the regular teams behind them. Green Team runs roughly 6 to 9 months, and it is engineered to break people. Around half wash out. Those who finish are assigned a color and vanish into the unit. From that moment, they are no longer called soldiers or even SEALs. Inside JSOC, they are simply operators. Numbers and colors only mean something once they are tested. The unit's first real combat came fast, and it came at a cost. In October 1983, during the United States invasion of Grenada, SEAL Team 6 was sent in. One element was tasked with reaching the island's Governor-General Paul Schoon, pinned down inside his residence. But during a nighttime insertion into rough open water, 4 operators drowned. The unit's first combat fatalities. Men lost before the mission had truly begun. 2 years later, in October 1985, it deployed again during the Achille Lauro crisis, when hijackers seized an Italian cruise ship and murdered a disabled American passenger named Leon Klinghoffer. Each operation, a win or a loss, fed straight back into the structure, refining how the squadrons trained, how they inserted, how they planned. Why does that matter? Because the unit you see today was never designed on paper. It was filed down, mission by mission, into the shape it now holds. And this entire machine, assault, recon, mobility, intelligence, selection, is what stood behind a single 40-minute raid in Abbottabad on the night Osama bin Laden died. The public remembers 2 helicopters and a handful of men on a rooftop. What the public did not see was the architecture, the months of Black Squadron groundwork, the JSOC intelligence fusion, the Red Squadron assault element, the backup force, the planners. The raid was the visible tip. The structure was the iceberg. Here is the strangest part of the whole design. The unit's real name is a secret the government still guards, even while the entire world watches its work. The Pentagon does not confirm operational details about the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. It rarely says the name aloud at all. Members are forbidden from publicly identifying as part of it. When a mission succeeds, the credit goes to a deliberately vague phrase, United States Special Operations Forces. And when a name does leak, it is almost always the old retired one, SEAL Team 6. The disinformation Marcinko invented in 1980 has become the official cover that hides whatever replaced it. Who watches a unit that does not officially exist? That secrecy carries a cost. In 2015, the New York Times published a long investigation into the unit, built on interviews with current and former members. It described a force used so relentlessly after September 11th that the line between a counterterrorism unit and a global manhunting machine had begun to blur. It raised questions with no clean answers. Reporters described that secretive intelligence element, Black Squadron, growing into something closer to a private spying service. They documented allegations that some operators had mutilated the bodies of the dead, a practice insiders reportedly described with a single cold word. Internal reviews were conducted. Almost none of them ever reached the public. And that is the tension built into the very structure we just took apart. Every layer that makes the unit lethally effective, the secrecy, the compartmentation, the colors that keep one squadron from knowing the full work of another, the name that was always a lie, is also a layer that makes it nearly impossible to hold accountable from the outside. The men themselves are extraordinary. Their discipline is real. Their sacrifices are real. Petty Officer Neil Roberts fell from a helicopter onto a frozen Afghan mountaintop called Takur Ghar in March 2002 and died fighting alone, surrounded, before help could reach him. That is not a legend. That happened. But the system constructed around such men was designed, from its very first day, to be invisible. And a thing that is invisible by design is a thing that answers to almost no one. So here is the question worth carrying out of this file. We celebrate this unit more than almost any other in our history. We make the films, we buy the books, we cheer the raids from our living rooms. And yet its real name is classified. Its structure is officially denied. Its oversight is a closed loop inside a fence. And the man who built it was erased from its own record. What does it mean when the most admired unit in a democracy is also the one its own citizens are permitted to understand the least? When the price of that excellence is that no one outside the fence can truly see what is done in their name? Subscribe to Phantom Directive. Tell us in the comments which squadron, which operation, or which sealed corner of this unit you believe still has not been honestly explained. Because the file on the Naval Special Warfare Development Group is open only a crack. And a door that opens only a crack is a door that can always be quietly closed again.